Hey YouTube! So, I don't know if you know, but Anita Sarkeesian's raising money to make a new series. And this time, instead of focusing on video games or pop culture, things that she claims she actually knows stuff about, she's focusing on ordinary women. Now, I'm not in the camp that automatically assumes this is going to be bad. It could be good. It could. It has the potential to be good. I mean, there's nothing to say it's automatically going to be absolute trash. Except for the fact that, Anita Sarkeesian's involved. But I was prepared to give it the benefit of the doubt. So after seeing everyone commenting on the video, I decided that I would go and watch it for myself, Best way to decide if anything's up your alley or not is to go and check it out. So I did. And I'm really glad that I did, because now I get to make this video. Now, I could go through the video frame by frame and point out all of the lies and almost slanderous or, potentially insulting remarks towards, gamers and men and the public in general that she makes throughout this video. But instead of doing that, I'm going to take the high road and actually just look at the women she's decided to do these particular episodes on for her series. Because, as we know, Anita is the king of spin, apparently. Or at least she likes to think so. And she's decided to take particular important female figures throughout history and twist them and turn them until they look like examples of, poor women being stamped on by the patriarchy. And as I'll show in this video, that's actually completely false. And she takes quite a few things out of context or liberties with particular people, and I assume that this trend is going to continue throughout the series and not just stop here in her trailer video. So, let's begin, shall we?
Ordinary women daring to defy history.
Now, from this particular title screen, you would assume that she's taking examples of ordinary women, run-of-the-mill, ordinary women throughout history who have decided to, go against the odds and have, achieved great strides, be it socially or, economically or politically or scientifically. And just after one watch of her video, I realized that's tactically not true. I'll get into that more when we actually get to her list of women that she's going to be doing this mini-series on. But, yeah, there's a theme here, and it'll be pretty clear once we get down to that, so.
Jing started out working in a brothel and ended up as the feared commander of one of the largest pirate fleets in history.
She was a mercenary with a boat. And this is worthy of an entire episode about how great she was at bucking the trend of not being a pirate with a boat. Look, I'm not going to go into this one. She married some guy and they had the biggest pirate fleet ever, which was great, and she basically retired on a mound of cash that she got after beheading, slashing, and murdering her way through the Red China Sea for like 20 years. If you want to do an episode about how women can be just as bloodthirsty, cutthroat, and murderous as men, job done. And she didn't do it for some noble cause of gender equality or justice for the poor. She did it because she was poor and she wanted money. So she used the power that she had and she stole what she wanted, and then she retired on a huge amount of cash and drank it up until she died. Basically, she ain't no Robin Hood, but I bet you that's how she's portrayed in Anita's miniseries.
Goldman's radical ideas about gender and individual freedom got her kicked out of at least 3 countries and labeled one of the most dangerous women in America.
Oh yeah, she was definitely one of the most dangerous women in America at that time, mostly because she advocated the use of violence to further political agendas. What we call terrorism today. And not only did she advocate the use of violence, she advocated the use of that violence to a large audience that followed her and hung on her every word. An awful lot like the people who follow Anita today. I'm sure that she had some very good ideas about atheism, freedom of speech, marriage, free love, all subjects that she wrote on and spoke on extensively. But the fact that she advocated violence and the use of violence as a political tool to further an agenda tells me that she and I would not see eye to eye. because I do not advocate the use of violence ever. I think it is never appropriate unless in self-defense, and especially never appropriate when used to further someone's political views. I think that's abhorrent. And the fact that Anita would seek to twist this into a, Goliath versus David scenario with Emma being little David fighting against the big man, when she was implicit in the organization and almost execution of a murder purely for political reasons of all the women throughout history who fought for gender equality and for freedom of speech. This is the one you choose, Anita? This tells me a lot about the narrative you're attempting to push here. And I also find it quite ironic that Feminist Frequency is doing a video about Emma Goldman, someone who distanced themselves from first-wave feminism and its efforts towards women's suffrage. So, yeah, just a little hint of irony there.
Murasaki Shikibu lived at a time when women's names were rarely even written down, but it didn't stop her from writing the first modern novel.
Now we get into the interesting part. Murasaki Shikibu was actually the author of the first modern novel. This Tale of Genji is well known and has been, rehashed thousands of times, hundreds of movies made about it. But Murasaki was not your average woman. She wasn't ordinary in any way, shape or form. She knew how to read and write and speak Chinese fluently in a time when women were not taught to speak, write or read Chinese. She learned at the heel of her father, which was also odd because at that time, in the Heian period, women or girls didn't live with their fathers. They lived in their mother's house because men and women held separate houses, especially if you were an aristocrat, which Murasaki was. So not only was she the most privileged class in Japan, she also had access to one of the best educations in Japan because her father allowed her to sit in on her brother's lessons. And then after marrying her husband and having a child and him unfortunately dying, she entered the Japanese court. She was one of the ladies-in-waiting to the current empress at the time. So in no way was Murasaki ordinary. She had enough money and influence and power to spend most of her time reading and writing poetry, which, might I add, she was exceptional at, but she was in no way ordinary. Now, I suspect Anita is going to try and spin this as she had to hide her education because it was, deemed unfit for a woman to know Chinese, and that's true, it was. But mostly because it was during a period where Japan was rejecting a lot of the traditions of China in favor of Japanese, and that was a way for her to protect herself from political ramifications of, exposing her education. However, her works were very well received. Within court, people were excited every time she finished a new chapter, and it was subsequently copied and distributed among the noblemen, and within 100 years of her first publishing her stories, it became mandatory reading for anybody who was in the aristocracy or, wished to be well read within Japan. So, yeah, she wasn't exactly, a poor farm girl who learned to read Chinese and wrote an epic novel. She was a well-read, educated aristocrat who wrote an epic novel in a time where most people couldn't read or write Japanese, let alone Chinese. Anyway, we'll move on to the next one, the one that made me super mad.
Ada Lovelace's doctor said her feminine mind was too weak and fragile to handle advanced math. She ignored him and wrote the world's first computer program.
I literally got so mad when I watched this part of the video. I had to stop the video and come back about 15 minutes later. Now, Anita at least gets right that Ada did write the first piece of computer code. But everything else she said? Complete bullshit. You know that quote Anita just spouted at us about how her doctor said that she couldn't handle mathematics because of her fragile female mind? Yeah, her doctor didn't say that at all. The man who did say that her fragile female mind couldn't handle it, or that her mind or the problems she was doing might be beyond the strength of a woman's physical power of application, was her tutor, who then was subbed out for the female Scottish astronomer, Mary Somerville. In fact, Ada had access to the brightest mathematical minds in all of England and in most parts of the world at that time. Her parents were loaded. She was the daughter of Lord Byron. She had access to people and training and tutelage most people only dream of, even today. And the suggestion that she did it all her own, complete bunk. Her mother had supported her learning ever since she was about 3 or 4 years old. Yes, Ada was a genius, but she also had access to people, money, and training nobody else during that era except other aristocrats could get. I expect that Anita will downplay her access to training and education, while also demonizing Babbage for, I don't know, not accurately portraying her contribution to the Menembria paper, even though he did, and everyone at the time knew about it. I will say that it was quite popular at the time to demonize Ada's mother, and, of course, Ada, and effectively blame them for the death of Lord Byron, who was England's sweetheart. But the fact that people like me, girls like me, grew up with Ada Lovelace as one of our heroes says that this narrative of patriarchy and burying female heroes to the point of not having any is complete bunk.
Ida B. Wells was born a slave but became a daring investigative reporter who exposed the horrors of lynching after the Civil War.
Ida B. Wells is perhaps the only ordinary woman who achieved extraordinary things on this entire list. And for that, I give her mad props. She did a lot for equality of genders and races in America in a time where it sorely needed people to stand up and be counted for that. But everyone else on this list is either a murderer, a supporter of murder, or an aristocrat. So, good job. So there's a few other little nitpicky points that I want to address before I end the video, so I'll just rip straight into that.
Well, you may not have learned about them in history books.
What kind of history books are you reading, Anita? Seriously. Most history lessons in a country focus on the history of that country. Very rarely do they rove outside of that purview. So it's not that strange that someone in America hasn't heard of Murasaki or Shinji. And I'm a little bit offended that you think I wouldn't know who Ada Lovelace is, given that she was one of my childhood heroes.
Each of them was surrounded by cultural messages that said women had to be small, quiet, and submissive in order to be good. But they spoke up for themselves, often at the cost of harassment, slander, racism, and even death threats.
I felt that clip pretty much explained how I felt about her previous statement perfectly. Those women weren't just surrounded by cultural messages, those cultural messages were reinforced with behaviours such as beatings, or being submitted to an asylum, or, I don't know, being murdered, or killed. And do you know how 2 of those 5 got around it? By being rich and powerful. If you have money and you have influence, you can get away with doing stuff that the rest of the population isn't allowed to do. 2 of them were being told to stop what they were doing because they were literally breaking the law and hurting or killing people. So I think that society was within its rights to tell them to please stop now.
In a world that was designed to silence and diminish them, they had to be more than just talented. They had to be defiant.
So, not ordinary then. Great. Good to see that your series about ordinary women is totally about extraordinary, talented, rich, beautiful, or, you know, just mercenary women. Brilliant. Good job. So, I think that's the end of my problems with her video. I mean, not the end of my problems with her, but this particular video. Please let me know what you think. If I've fucked up or said something wrong, let me know in the comments. Yeah. I think my next video is going to be on the word privilege and how it's misused by SJWs. And I will see you next time. Laters!